Is buying a freeze dryer right for you? We're going to lay it all on the line today so you can make a good decision. Hey, Provident Preppers, I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Kylene, and today we are going to, full disclosure, completely transparent, let you know what we think the advantages and disadvantages are to having a freeze dryer. We've had ours, the first one we bought it'll be 2 years ago in January. And the other one we bought like 4 or 5 months later because I liked it so much. So we have two freeze dryers. We have Harvest Right's medium freeze dryer and we have Harvest Right's large freeze dryer. And there are differences even in the sizes of the freeze dryer. But in this video, what we want to do is be completely transparent because freeze dryers aren't for everybody. But for me, it's, as you can see, it's made a huge difference in my ability to preserve food for the longer term.
One of the things that made us decide that we wanted to get the second freeze dryer is we have lots of friends and neighbors and family who are trying to prepare that can't afford to get a freeze dryer. And we thought, you know, if we can help them out and move them along, that's part of our mission accomplished.
And so that's kind of really fun. And one of the things that we do right now, our freeze dryer is going like crazy because it's harvest season, right? Yeah. But then in the winter time, that's the time when we're able to do more of the things like we'll buy some frozen vegetables or some of the meat. We have a friend who's she bought a bunch of ground hamburger and she wants to cook it up and freeze dry it. And as soon as this big jump is over, that's when we're gonna start doing some of the things that can stay frozen in the freezer for just a little while longer. The biggest advantage to freeze drying that I can see is that I can completely control the ingredients. The majority of food that you see here is just food. Like these are berries out of our yard. They were washed and put on the freeze dryer tray and freeze dried. There is no added sugar, there is no added salt, there is nothing but freeze dried berries. Now, like in these are cherry tomatoes, and these, I did sprinkle seasoned salt on the top because these are a fantastic snack food with that little bit of seasoned salt on it. I'm not saying you shouldn't use sugar or salt. What I'm saying is I get to completely control what's in it. I know where these tomatoes grew in my backyard, and I know what fertilized them, and they're completely organic. And so to me, that means a lot. One of the other things that comes in really handy is the leftovers.
Yeah.
So we have a couple examples here. My brother made a bison roast for Sam, and it was absolutely delicious. But at the end of the meal, we still had quite a bit of meat left. Yeah. Now, if we would have just put it in the refrigerator, some of it would have gotten eaten, but some of it would have ended up going to the dog, right? That's just the way that it works when things get hid in the back of the fridge. So instead of doing that, after dinner, I took the leftover meat and I put it in a quart-sized freezer bag and I stuck it in the freezer. And then after I get enough of those quart-sized freezer bags full of food, I put them in the freeze dryer. I do take the freezer or the plastic freezer bag off and I just set it there in the freeze dryer. And then we freeze dry it. And now this meat, it's absolutely delicious, but it's shelf stable for, I don't know, 10, 15 years at least. Bison was very low in fat, and the way that it was prepared, it didn't have a lot of fat. This is another example. So when Kenny left for Costa Rica and Sam came home from Alaska, we had a huge party and we had all kinds of friends and family come, and there was this big open house. Well, you don't know if you're gonna feed 50 people or 200 people. And so it was Mexican themed. We did kind of the Cafe Rio, Costa Vida kind of theme. And this is pulled pork. So at the end of that night, instead of just having this massive amount of meat that we couldn't use or that we'd put in the freezer and would go bad eventually, we freeze dried a whole bunch of it. And this is incredibly delicious. Meat reconstituted after being freeze dried, it maintains the original texture. And I've been just incredibly happy with it.
Really, really good stuff.
It is really good stuff. And the nutrition, It's so much better for you than any other preservation process. So freeze drying maintains something like 98% of the nutrients, where other forms like, okay, let's talk about this real quick. So freeze drying isn't the only way that we preserve food. For instance, these are from apples we got off our tree this year. We made applesauce. This is heated. First of all, the apples are heated and cooked down, and then we put them through a strainer, and then we put them in the jars, and then we water bath can them for a really long time. Any nutrients that are heat sensitive are dead in this, right? It still has all of its minerals. These are dehydrated apples, and they taste great, right? Not as good as the freeze-dried apples. I just have to admit, the freeze-dried has this like, wow, kind of intensified flavor.
And they stay more true to their original. I mean, they still look
size.
very similar. These, of course, dehydrate down and kind of shrink up a lot. They're both good. But
Yeah.
I think certainly the freeze-dried is a better quality.
Absolutely.
And nicer looking and tastier.
So these would have more of its original nutrients, right? There'll be some vitamin C in these, where this, because I put them in the dehydrator, it's gone. Now, the other thing though is that dehydrated food, you can put a whole lot more in this jar than you can with freeze-dried food. This doesn't weigh or the freeze-dried doesn't weigh anywhere near as much as the dehydrated, well, in this jar, right? It's just different. Another thing that we do, like, so here, we're gonna pick those up.
Yeah.
This is an example of plums. We have a lot of plums, right? This, we make a plum nectar mixed with orange juice.
Very, very tasty.
It's
yes.
good. And these are bottled plums.
Yep. And these are the freeze-dried plums. Again, you can see they're pretty much true to almost the size that they went in there. These are the dehydrated. Obviously, they've shrunk up a lot more. And again, you can get more dehydrated food in the same space, but I don't know, I really like the freeze-dried a little bit better.
The freeze-dried tastes amazing, but there's something very different about the dried plums, right? That taste, and both of them have a place. You can't freeze-dry jams and jellies. I'm always going to have to bottle those, or make frozen freezer jam. That's what I'm trying to say,
Yeah.
freezer jam. So there's a place for everything. If you're expecting it to be like the end all, it's not. It's just not. There are some things that you can't freeze dry. You can't freeze dry things that are high in fat or things that are really high in sugar. It doesn't work well. We talked about how the flavor is so incredible. The shelf life, that's another thing. So this applesauce, well, realistically, it's supposed to have 18 months. We usually push it a little while.
2 or 3 years.
Right, 2 or 3 years, but sometimes I've had some on the shelf for 5 or 6 years, and it's fine. But these freeze-dried apples can easily be on the shelf for 25 years and still be good, where this applesauce isn't. So it extends the shelf life, and so that's a great advantage. Another great advantage is that I can freeze-dry things like the meats very successfully. This is non-fat yogurt with strawberries. There's no sugar or anything in it, just plain non-fat yogurt with blended strawberries from our garden. And this is delicious. It reconstitutes really well. There's not another way that I could preserve this and make it be like that. So that's one of the other things. One thing that I forgot to mention is that it is incredibly simple to freeze dry. Like with these apples, all I did was cut them up, put them on the freeze dryer tray, and put them in there, right? And then we start it, and you never know quite when the freeze dryer is gonna be done, but when it's done, then we just pull them out. I put an oxygen absorber in the jar, put these in, close the lid. That's all I have to do to it. This, I have to spend a lot of time processing. There's been a lot of very late nights making applesauce lately, but it's super, super easy. So let's move on to number 2, which is storage.
Let's talk a little bit about storage. Some things are going to store longer than others. If you've got something that's higher in fat, don't plan on storing that nearly as long as something that is very low in fat. Fat tends to reduce shelf life. So eggs are a great example. They do have fat in them. They aren't going to store as long. We're not going to use these in 25 years. I don't think they would probably be very good in 25 years. They're excellent right now and will be for a few years.
Maybe 10.
Yeah, maybe 10 years.
I'm thinking maybe 10, and it depends on storage temperature, but freeze-dried raw eggs, They are amazing. Like, you cannot tell the difference. When you make scrambled eggs, you won't be able to tell the difference between fresh and freeze-dried, like, at all. It's amazing. So this is another example of when we have more, because we have chickens and hens, and when they lay more eggs than we can eat, we just freeze-dry them so that when they're not laying as well, we got ourselves covered.
There we go. So, and many things you're going to get 25 years out of. They're just excellent for that.
But you have to store them correctly. So I hands down, I love to store them in mason jars. And the reason why is because I'm already all set up. I've been bottling for years. And so John's built me these really nice bottle shelves. I can put them on the shelf. I see exactly what's there, which means I can rotate through this and use it in my regular daily life, right? My intent with my freeze drying actually isn't to put it on a shelf and let it wait for 25 years.
Right.
Mine is so that I can have food whenever I need it. So if I'm making fried rice and I'm out of mixed vegetables, I got it covered. All I do is rehydrate these and use them in my fried rice. So and like with this, oh, I have to show you this. So this is so much fun. I love to use fresh ginger in recipes, but it's a pain, right? To always make sure that you have fresh ginger, because then if you don't use it, then it's gonna go bad in your fridge. Well, what I started doing is freeze drying ginger. So I'll spend a couple hours, I'll buy a whole bunch, especially when it's on sale. Recently we got some at a Hispanic market where it was very inexpensive. And I just spend a few hours and I peel it and we cut it and then I freeze dry it. So now whenever I need fresh ginger, this tastes like fresh ginger, right? And it's got the same nutrients. I can just open my jar, take some out and use it in my recipe, and it's super fast. So it makes my life more convenient. This is the same thing with garlic. And in fact, you can click the card in the corner and it'll take you to a video that we showed where we dehydrated some garlic and we freeze dried a bunch and I saved some fresh. But sometimes I'm not in the mood to peel garlic. I'm in a hurry and I don't want to. This has me covered. So I'm super excited about that. So for the most part, I love to use mason jars. However, sometimes I am using Mylar bags because I only have so many mason jars, right? And there'll be times when I just need to, like when we made all of this pork from Kenny and Sam's party, I didn't have enough mason jars. And so we put some in Mylar bags, and that's great because they work really well. In fact, Wallaby has just come out with new Mylar bags, and I want to show you just because, okay, I don't like to put more freeze-dried food in the bag than what's going to be used, because once you open a container of freeze-dried food, it will start to go soft. So I don't want to open this and eat half of it and then leave it on the shelf for 3 or 4 months. It would be better if I knew I was going to eat all of this at once. But one of the little tricks that I do is I oversize my oxygen absorbers. I'll put an oxygen absorber in it that is too big. So a quart jar normally would take 100 cc oxygen absorber, but I'm usually using like 400 cc oxygen absorbers. And I just put it in the bottom and then I'll seal it. Now that means that the first couple times when I access this, I just put the top back on and it will reseal it. So that's another reason why I really like that. But Wallaby has, they've got 1 cup bags, which it would be great for spices and for smaller, I do a lot of herbal type remedies, and that would be great for some of those. They've got 1 pint, and they've got the 1 quart size. And these are some, so Harvest Right also has good bags, and this is a really good size. But Harvest Right also sells this style. I'm not a fan of this style, and it's because I like the ones that are gusseted on the bottom and that can stand up. I'm just not a fan of these, but this is great. So you can also get from Harvest Right, you can get their Mylar bags and their oxygen absorbers, and this is the only size that they sell besides this one, but I wouldn't get this one. But that's just me personally, right? And everybody has their preferences. Now, one time—
Speaking of preferences, let me weigh in here. I'm okay with the jars. They do have some disadvantages, though. Obviously, they're breakable.
Okay.
and they do let light penetrate, and light tends to degrade food. So if you're storing them in a dark place, that's great. You just have to remember that the breakage thing and the light thing. So otherwise, yeah, I'm a fan of the jars. The Mylar bags, we're struggling a little bit with how to rotate those effectively because they're in different size bags. So we're putting them in totes so that they're protected from rodents, which is vitally important. But then, you know, we're trying to keep an inventory of those, and it's just not quite as easy as far as rotation and knowing what you've got.
Because I don't have it in my regular mind, right? If I have to go get it out of the tote, I have to lift this tote off of this one, and I have to reach it and get this one, and then I always feel bad about cutting the Mylar. Now we do reuse the Mylar, so we'll cut it off and then we'll use it again. It'll lose its zip and it gets smaller every time, but we will reuse it because I like to, you know, just take best advantage of the resources that I have. But I haven't found a really good way to organize them. So if you've got good ideas, I'm all up for that.
Sounds like a spreadsheet is in order here.
Oh no!
Yes.
I don't want to open up a spreadsheet to know where my food is. I want to go to my little pantry and I want to see it. Okay, that's John. He's smarter than I am. Okay, but one of the things that I would highly recommend is MRE pouches. So if you are making meals that you want to be able to just pour the hot boiling water in, you need an MRE pouch, because some of these, like this one, it's not rated to pour boiling water in and to cook things. So you're gonna wanna make sure that you get the MRE pouches. They're always sideways, right? They're not this way. And they're just really good. Most of them come with a zip. I know Wallabies all comes with it, and they also come with their oxygen absorbers. But you can just pull off this tab, right? And then you dump your hot water in and you zip it back and let it cook just like that. Now this is beef mushroom barley soup. This is another example of using my leftovers. So made a big pot of soup and I had some of this left over. And so instead of putting it in the fridge, or I could put it in the freezer, but we've also found in the freezer that kind of things get lost in the bottom and rotten and anyway. So the freezer is absolutely an option. But now this is shelf stable for a really long time. So
and for you backpackers, this is really, really good. Throw in a bunch of these and just add some hot water and eat.
These are some that Sam did for his last backpacking trip. This is taco hash. And you know, he's got add 3/4 cup of water. This is ham, eggs, and cheese, add 1 cup of water. So he's got it all, you know, measured out what he likes, and that's how he likes to do it. So great advantages with the storage. You just need to do what works for you. If Jonathan was in charge of all the food in our house, he'd probably do it differently, but this is my baby. So he builds the shelves for me.
Back off.
Yeah, and our storage room is completely dark. There's no windows or anything in it, so I'm not worried about it. And now what you're really waiting for, number 3, let's talk about the problems and the disadvantages, and we aren't holding anything back. Telling it like it is.
Okay, so the first drawback is cost. And you know, that's a bare fact reality that everyone has to face. These, right now they're on special. They've got a November special.
Oh, a Black Friday special till November 30th, 2022. I think it's $300 off the small one and $500 off the medium or the large. So if you're gonna get one, this is the best sale that they run.
Yes, but still, we're talking $2,200 to $3,400. And the old pumps that used to come with them, it looks like they've just completely sent those packing, which is a great thing. We have the Premier pump. The Premier pump works really well. I don't have any issues with that pump. It's just done a really good job. And
so the problem with the oldest pump was that you had to change the oil every 5 batches.
Right.
But the Premier pump, how often do you change it?
Well, they tell you can go 20 to 30 batches. 25 is kind of a good average. I still like to do it every 10 because it's really not that difficult. It's got a little valve on the bottom of the pump. I actually put it in a container and put it in the freezer. and then you get this little lens of ice. So you get rid of that because you don't want the water in the oil. And then I put it into their filter here and filter it, and then we reuse that oil. So doing an oil change, that was one of the biggest reasons why initially I was just like, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to have to deal with an oil change thing. Well, as it turns out, it's like a 5-minute job. I just open the valve, the oil drops out, I put in some new oil, and away we go. Of course, there is a little bit of time associated with the freezing and then putting it into the filter here, but really not a big issue. There are some little technical issues that we've had. We've had a couple of times that we needed to talk to technical support and get a little help. And right now we're dealing with an issue on our medium freeze dryer. It's called a mid-batch heater failure, which the heaters seem to be working, but for some reason there's a relay in there that thinks it isn't working. So, and like anything, you know, a car, let's compare it to a car. You know, when you get so many miles on a car, you just know you're going to have a few little issues that you're going to have to take care of. There's always going to be repairs that need to be made, and we're dealing with one of those right now. Now, I don't think it's going to cost a ton, and I'm going to do the job myself, partly because I don't want to pay somebody else to do a fairly easy job, but partly because I like to do things myself. I like to understand how things work, and I like to just take care of things. So that's really important to understand. So this is not like a refrigerator. It's not like you just open and close the door and you don't ever have to worry about maintenance for 10 years or so, right? This is different. This is like a car. I personally never change the oil on my car. I don't repair my car at all. It's him. That's right. And
that's
so okay.
Same thing with the freeze dryer. I don't do any of this. It's him. So you have to really carefully consider whether or not this is something that you want to be able to do. Can you have somebody else fix it for you or do it?
Sure.
Yeah, you absolutely can. But there is a cost associated with that. And so you need to be just cognizant of that and understand, full disclosure, transparent, right? You're probably going to have to repair your freeze dryer eventually.
That's just, again, just part of life. Now, one of the things that when we were initially thinking about these, the second reason I wasn't real thrilled about doing this is, well, I'm sure it's going to chew up a ton of power. You know, energy costs are just going to go crazy. As it turns out, we're spending about $1.50 a batch on average. Some are a little bit less, some are a little bit more. And when I first started doing that, see, I keep this little log.
Of course he keeps a little log.
Now, I could do this on my phone, but I just like to do it on paper. And originally I had, you know, the day I started it and the time I started it and the time I finished it and the date. And, you know, because I was trying to understand this animal. And so I had all this stuff on here. Now I don't use all that anymore because I was figuring out how much energy and how much time. And once we kind of got a handle on that, I quit doing it, but I still keep the log because I want to know when it's time to change the oil on this. And like I said, I try and do it every 10 batches. So I do keep a record of what we're doing.
And I think he wants to know if we're getting our money's worth. Like, are we really doing this enough to make it worthwhile?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
do it.
And in fairness, you know, we talked about the maintenance. For us, these machines have stayed very busy between our stuff and neighbors, friends, and family. We're probably doing 2 or 3 batches a week.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we really work these machines out. But yeah, there are some maintenance issues. There's occasionally a technical thing. And right now I need to do an upgrade on the firmware. There's a new firmware version that came out and I need to update that. So there's just little things here and there. Like I said, just like a car, there's just little things now and then that have to be done. Oh,
and we should probably talk about this. So we have a medium and a large, right? Now the medium actually will take that same food and it will freeze dry it much faster than the large. The large takes a lot longer, and you figure, I think it's because we've got the same size motor. Is that what it is? Is that what it is? A motor?
The same pump, yeah.
Same pump, it's a pump.
Yeah.
So both of them use the same pump, and one has significantly more food in it So it is going to take a lot longer to do the job. So if I want something done really quickly, I go for the medium. But if I've just got a lot of food, I go for the large, and I know that it's just going to take me a little while longer. So.
Yep. One of the other issues that we had, and we talked about this in a previous video, is the heat. Our freeze dryers are in our garage because that was the best place for us to put them. The drawback of that is in the summer, that gets too warm in the garage.
Yeah.
For Harvest Right, likes you to keep it below 80 if possible. At 90, they're saying, yeah, you're going to take a lot longer to do the job, and it's harder on the machine. So that was one of the things that became an issue for us, and we struggled with it. And in this video, we talked about how I went about hopefully solving that, and it has worked extremely well.
Yeah, so just a little short recap. He put a little window air conditioning unit in one of the windows in our garage. We have two. And in the other one, he put a fan up here that blows the air out. It's the hot air out, and then sucks the cool air in. And at night, we would leave that both of those fans on so that it would totally replace that hot air in the garage with cooler air. And then we'd close that window during the day, and the air conditioner would go on when the temperature was too hot. So that could be used actually for people storing food in their garage too. But for us, it made it so we could use the freeze dryers during the summer, because I was getting pretty ticked. I'm like, you can't tell me I can't use my freeze dryers.
Right, and it did work really well, and we used only about $30 worth of energy from the time that we did that video till the end of the season, which was about
everything.
Which was about 30 batches of food, and we used less than $30. So it cost us an extra $1, but it allowed us to use the machines and to do it in a way that wasn't hard on them. And
he also said that it probably makes it so our freezer didn't cost as much to run that's in the garage because the temperature was cooler.
Yes, so the fans, we only used the air conditioner when the freeze dryers were running, but we used the fans almost every night just because we could cool that down in there. And then if we did want to freeze dry, we had it a lot cooler. And again, the freezer is fighting against heat less, so it runs more efficiently. So turned out to be really good, really good. I hope you'll go take a look at that video if this is something that appeals to you.
And then one of the other things that was kind of, and still it's a little bit frustrating for me, is you never know how long it's going to take the food to finish. So I'll put something in and think, oh, this should be done by tomorrow night, and it's not done till the next day, or it might be done tomorrow afternoon. And if they've got the freeze dryer set up really well, so it just keeps the food frozen, right, until you can get to it, and then you warm the trays and take it out. But it's not something that you can go by your clock, right? You can't tell for sure it's going to be done in this amount of time. So you have to learn to deal with that. Is there anything else you can think of?
No, I think we've hit kind of the major issues that we've had and some of the struggles, but I think that sums it up.
Okay. I hope this was helpful for you. This is not for everyone. Freeze dryers, seriously, I think they are a wonderful benefit. I am so very happy that we have two freeze dryers. I've been able to preserve a lot of our own food and food that I buy, like my turmeric, or not my turmeric, I could do turmeric. That's a great idea. Yeah. Like my ginger, right? So that I have this fresh ginger ready anytime, and I wouldn't be able to get that in any other way. So I am super grateful that I have a freeze dryer. It's not the only way that I preserve food. If you can't afford a freeze dryer, that doesn't mean that you can't preserve your own food. You can still bottle your food, and you can still dehydrate, right? Dehydrating is less expensive. And so you can still do different things. So don't let that stop you from getting your food storage. But think about it. Is a freeze dryer something that would be helpful for you? If you get it before November 30th, 2022, you can take advantage of the Black Friday sale, but do not go into debt. That was the other thing.
Yeah, we encourage you not to go into debt. So you really need to think this out, look at the cost, the advantages and the disadvantages, and weigh it out and figure out what is right for you.
Because it's different for all of us. So For those of you who have a freeze dryer, the question of the day is, what is your favorite food to freeze dry? And for those of you who don't have a freeze dryer yet, what would you love to freeze dry? Comment below. And thanks for being part of the solution.